Welcome to KimAppa. Jarrod and Robbie are here. I'm back from my holiday. Robbie's back from, wait, Robbie's on permanent holiday. He's probably doing,
Mm.
actually, he's probably taking a pause from doing motivational videos or whatever else he's been doing recently, playing paddle, all the normal stuff that he does. Uh, what have you been up to without me? Did you miss it? Not a whole week without KimAppa. You must have
Yeah, it just
been jonesing, man.
yeah, it just felt like a void. Like last Monday, I was like, "What's going on?" And like it's just I was telling Sheets, I was like, "There's something amiss, right?" Like Kimbo's off on a break with his family, which we know as parents is not a break for the parents. It's just a holiday for the kids. Uh, and so she's like, "Yeah, you are so used to KimAppa right now that 1 week without it, it feels like you're getting withdrawal symptoms." I'm like, "Yeah, you might be right, actually."
I was driving. I can't remember. I think I was driving from Antwerp up to Holland on Monday, and I was like, I could probably get in early enough and like do a Kimappa in the afternoon. And my wife's like, just you don't have
Stop.
to do it. It's okay. Robbie may not even be available. He has a life of his own. And I was like, it's fair enough. It's fair enough. It's good to be back. Do you have Asia Cup fever?
Not
Actually, I
yet.
know you do. You say that. I know you do because as I came onto this recording, you were sitting there pronouncing Sri Lankan players out loud.
Yeah, no, no. So because I was at Lala Gay's name, and then I remember when I was in Sri Lanka, it was what's his name? Oh my God, why is this happening to me, man?
I know you were
Um,
just reading all their names out. I'm surprised you
you
don't
know, no,
remember
well,
them.
so Lala Gay. No, I'm trying to remember. My friend's name who taught me the correct pronunciation of his name. So I would say Wellalage. So he said it's not Wellalage, it's Wellalage, and that's how it's pronounced in Sinhalese. So like, okay, I'm gonna remember that. And so when someone kind of corrects me, then I kind of take it and I'm like, okay, because I had a difficult surname, right? Even in India, when they were like Otapa, Uthappa, and then so like they wouldn't say Uthappa as it, and I had to teach people, and then yeah, I remember that time when in 2007 when I think it was Arts Atherton who said who introduced me as Atapata uh, in the in the post match
That's
prize
like a
distribution.
combination between you and Bhavanaj
Atapatu,
Patu. I think he was just
yeah.
thinking of someone he played against, right? It's really interesting. I remember the first time I commentated, I was like so worried about it because obviously back then I didn't know I had dyslexia, but
Yeah.
it now makes a lot of sense why I struggle with those sorts of things. And I struggle with sounds. That's one of the big things I have with dyslexia. So I don't pick up accents. Do you remember? I think her name's Cheryl Cole, the pop singer. Like when I came to
Hmm.
the UK, I thought she was speaking French on a TV show. I
Yeah,
was
she's
like,
got a very
wow.
thick,
Yeah,
thick
it's
accent,
but
doesn't she?
it's like a Geordie accent. But to me, it was
Yeah.
like so I don't pick up things like that very much. Sometimes someone will say, "Where's that person from in the UK?" And I'm like, I have no idea. They're not from London. That's about all I could tell you, right? And and so I really really struggle with that sort of stuff. And so when I started commentating, I was like, I'm going to get this right. And I remember that Andili Peflaqueo had never played a game, right?
Mm.
Like you never not played anything major, I should say. And he was coming to the Champions Trophy, and that was my first commentary gig. And Robbie, I spent like 40 minutes perfecting this, calling up South Africans, giving the voice notes, going, "Am I getting this right?" and everything, right? And I'm not sure I even do to this
And
day.
delay.
Uh, and then I didn't commentate a South African game in that tournament. They pulled me off the South African game that I was supposed to do, and they just never played another game that I was at. But so ever
You
since
just
then,
made too
I've
much
tried
of
to
a
do it.
big deal of it.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what happened.
I've been, and I don't think I've probably never comment. No, actually, I have. I remember commentating him once about 6 years later. So it's really tough, and a lot of commentators don't take the time to do it. And I have I have so many issues with it because I don't hear properly. And so I can't listen to someone else and work it out. So I have to write
Mm.
it out phonetically. And if you
Oh,
try and get
really?
someone, yeah, if you try and get someone from the country to write it out phonetically, like they like Sri Lanka and India are perfect examples of this. They write phonetically differently than English
Mm.
speakers do.
Yeah,
So
very
it doesn't
differently.
help
Yeah.
me all that much because the way that they use the H's and the S's are completely different than the way I would use H and an S. So
Yeah.
I still really I struggle with those sorts of names, and I try and do it right, but it's really hard. And the other thing is that in cricket, there's so many different naming cultures, right? Like if you think of India, there are names that are said differently in different areas of India, right? And then
Yeah.
and then you've got a Sri Lankan Tamil name will be said differently than an Indian Tamil name, and all these different things. I mean, it was only recently that Murali had his name changed on Cricinfo to the spelling that Murali wanted it to be, right? Like,
Oh, really?
yeah, because a lot of these names don't transfer into
Interesting.
English, right?
Yeah, they don't. They don't. In fact, they're pronounced differently in different states as well. So for me, in Karnataka, it would be called Uthappa. But if I went to Kerala, they'd say Uthappa. And then if I went to Andhra, they'd say Othappa. So it was very different in different places. And then if I went to England, they'd say Atapata.
Well, I mean, we'll talk about Ashwin later, but I always thought Ashwin was one of the more interesting ones in that he basically had to teach the world not to call him Ravi anymore, right? And yet
Yeah.
there are still senior Indian commentators, right? And I'm not talking about there's still commentators outside of India who definitely do this, but the senior Indian commentators who still call him Ravi Ashwin. So my big thing in cricket is that, and you get this with other sports where they actually send you the pronunciations of all the players' names by the players themselves. And when the weirdest tournament I ever did was, you're like this, when you get these offers and you're like, I have no interest in this, but I can't wait to do it. I commentated the finals of minor league cricket in America, right?
Oh, really?
Right, and most of the names were fine. They were names I was, but there was a couple of really good, like Andres Hus, I still can't say correctly, right? The
Andres
American
Hus.
player. Yeah, and we got him to pronounce his name to us because otherwise you're getting like the media person's interpretation of what the act. Do you know what I mean? So you need to be so specific. And what they do with a lot of other sports now, I think rugby does this and basketball does this, is they send out the list of all the names with the phonetic pronunciations, but also quite often with a video of the players saying their own names and the correct shortening of the name, right? So Ravichandran Ashwin is a perfect example. He wants to be Ash. He doesn't want to be Ravi, right? Like, so we're shortening
That's a
it the wrong
cultural thing,
direction.
isn't it?
Yeah,
That's a
but
cultural thing because I think in say in the south of India, the father's name precedes the son's name, right?
yeah,
So, but for me, even for me, right? Like my family name precedes even my father's name. So the family that my father belongs to, there's a name for that. So that name, Ayuda, it actually comes right at the front, and then Robin, and then Uthappa, So so for Ashwin it's also that. For Vijay it was also that. So Murli is actually his father's name. So M Vijay. So it's Murli Vijay. So Srishant is actually his name. Shantakumaran is basically his father's name, right? So it's S. Srishant. So people always, when they read names and saying Shantakumaran Srishant, they think, oh, Shantakumaran is his name. It's actually his father's name. So Ravichandran is actually Ashwin's dad's name. And so is Murli Vijay's, So that's how these names, and I think, that cultural sensitivity can be and be nice if at least the broadcasters can,
well, I mean,
follow it.
American sports, you spend a lot of time with the athletes learning these kinds of things, right? And as I said, there's no reason why every cricket board in the world doesn't do this. And it's fun social media content as well, getting that out there. But you're talking about the cultural stuff. It's not just cultural stuff. Like, I've grown up with Michaels who like to be Mick, who like to be Mike, who like to be Michael, right? But people shorten it, and it's just like, no, you've shortened it to the one that I'm not a Mike. I'm a Mick. And it's like simple things like that the players should be allowed to do. Anyway, I don't know how we got into this, but it is a fascinating.
Take my name. I like Robbie more than Robin, right? And I kind of go by Robbie everywhere else. But a lot of people ask me why Robbie. Because I like it. I'm like, oh, but why? I'm like, dude, why do I have to explain myself? I just like Robbie.
But you're not Rob.
I'm not Rob.
Yeah, do you see what I mean? So even when you've changed it, for some reason, you've made your name longer than it needs to be. You've actually, what sort of a sociopath does that to people? But the point being is that like you've picked that, that version of it, right? And I think, I think that's a really interesting one going forward of how players, and there are certain players who don't like to be referred to by things that they're very famous for, right? As you know, there are players that everyone outside of cricket calls them one thing, and everyone inside cricket calls them something completely different, right? Like those sorts of things really do happen. Sanju Samson, is he going to open for India in the Asia Cup?
Tough call, eh? Because in the Kerala Cricket League, he also batted in the middle order as a finisher initially.
Yep.
So
That didn't quite work though, did it?
No. Listen, it's not going to be that easy to work, right? And you can't do it at the age that Sanju's at. He's 29, 30 years old. You can't do it now. If you want to go down that road, you should have gone down it 5 years ago, right? And this is a thing that a lot of Indian cricketers who are really good batters don't really get, that they end up and they score a lot of runs, notwithstanding the runs they score, but they don't understand that the opportunities that they can get right at the top are going to be very few and far in between, right? And they might be openers and they might score a lot of runs and they might bat white ball cricket, red ball cricket. But the opportunities that they will get at the higher levels is not going to be as much, right? Or even if they do get an opportunity, it's going to be a smallish opportunity. It won't be an extended one. But if they can make a name for themselves down at as a finisher or a middle order bat, that I think has a lot more value for Indian cricket and two for franchise cricket, which is the way cricket's kind of moving towards. So I think a lot of opening batters, I think over the next few years, will probably move and transition into becoming finishers, right? And
I
that
don't
will
think they
be
will.
interesting to see. You don't think they will? I think they should
No,
if they had
I think
if they
they
had the wits
should.
about. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think they will because I just think there's so much. I think run tallies still matter so much within Indian cricket culture that moving down the order and making 250 runs a year, unless you're doing it at a strike rate of 200, I don't know if it's going to get the kind of attention. I actually think that I'll talk about the Australian team specifically. But if you look at the IPL has helped the Australian team specifically in that Marcus Stoinis had to bat down the order, right? And so I was at Melbourne Stars the year that Marcus Stoinis started opening, and I think there was an injury or something. I can't remember what it was, but something happened, and they sort of said, can he open? I mean, he'll be a perfect opener, right? He was
Yeah.
batting at maybe 3 or 4 at that stage. But I remember talking to someone involved in the Australian team, and they were like, "Don't make him open. We don't need him to open. We've got other guys who can open, right? What we need is 5 or 6." And when he went to the IPL, he was batting at 4, 5, 6, and those sorts of positions, right? Which when
Batted
he
at
went back
three
to the
for some time as well.
yeah, oh, I mean, he's pretty flexible, I think, as a player. But he's batted further down the order, and I think when they won that World Cup in Dubai, he was batting down the order for Australia and had been
He
batting down the
was.
order a little bit in the IPL as well at that point. And that's just one example of it. Actually, kind of helps to have that sort of stuff. Whereas in India, like if I'm a young Sanju Samson, I'm probably still thinking to myself, my best chance of getting noticed is at the top of the order. But as you said, how do you get that flexibility, right, that has the ability to move around the order a little bit more? And if you look at someone like Rohit Sharma, he's probably a number 4 who has batted everywhere from 6 to opening, right? And so that's probably rounded out his game a lot more than a lot of other players who've coming through that system.
Well, the thing about being open to batting anywhere else, anywhere in the batting order, reduces your chances to have an extended career, right? Because you're never really picked as a particular slot player, which is what I kind of suffered through, right? Because I was open to playing anywhere in the batting order, and I batted from number 1 to number 8. Every third innings of my international career was at a different position.
Yeah.
So for me, I couldn't nail either the top order position, the opening the batting position, or the finisher role position, right? But I like if I had enough time, then if was given the rope to kind of master each position or just kind of exist in that position, what came naturally to me, opening the batting came naturally to me. So I opened the batting and scored runs there. But when it came down to the middle order, you want a little bit more rope, because if you don't have that kind of rope, then to produce the kind of results that people are expecting middle order batters to produce right now, is going to be very, very hard. You want a strike rate of 100, upwards of 170, 180 and upwards, right? So to like when the risk percentage goes up that much, then the survival percentage comes down way more, right? So
Yeah.
keeping that in mind, it's also a good kind of note for selectors, for even what do you call them? Your the one who spot talent, your talent spotters, basically. Even them, they need to make sure that the guys they're picking for the middle order are guys who play at a high strike rate and a minimum of 180 and above. But the consistency on a scale of 10, your consistency should be close to about 4 or 5, right? That then you know that 50% of the matches that this kid comes off, right? But if you're expecting a 8 or 9 like consistency percentage with 180 above strike rate, that's going to be very, very rare to get, right? And it's almost like impossible to find that kind of quality of player. Even I think the best, I remember having a conversation with MS Dhoni once, and I was talking to him about captaincy, but I think it holds good even for batting in the death. He said, if I can follow my pattern of batting or captaincy and be successful 6 out of 10 times, then I am in the top 5% of finishers in the world, right? Of top 5% of successful captains in the world. And I think that holds true even for batting in the death or middle order batting. I think if you can be successful 6 out of 10 times at 170 to 200 strike rate, then you're in the top 2% of finishers in the world.
Yeah.
You know,
No, I think that's interesting. And just to go back to your other point too, that if you are Sanju Samson, you're probably going to struggle to hold down the top three spots anyway, right? If you're
yeah,
that kind of
it's
player.
gonna be hard.
But it's not the way that you think about stuff. You're
Yeah,
still going to be thinking about yourself as that player. Whereas actually, if Sanju Samson was a little bit more rounded like KR Rahul, or do you remember Joe Denley for England? Where you just like, Joe Denley's probably in the top 7 best batters in the country, but he's not the best in any particular position. But England took him everywhere, right?
yeah,
Because he could bat in any of those positions.
positions.
But as you said, you don't end up with a solid international career from there, right?
Yeah,
Because suddenly a number 5 comes through who's better than you, and you're like, wow, okay, well you're the one who ends up shifting. So it's an interesting one going ahead. But I do think that moving down. Well, someone put this in the comments actually. It's worth bringing this up because I think it was a really good comment. Musical Being says, Gill's selection for T20 International seems like an anachronism. Does the modern T20 International game allow for participation of all format players? Obviously it does. Like, I don't think either of us would say that it's time to ditch all format players. But it feels interesting to me that they've made a decision, not based on winning the Asia Cup and potentially the next World Cup, but they've made a decision based on the future of India, as a T20 side and who might be the captain going ahead. Is that the right decision? Like, should Shubman Gill come in, or should they have kept Sanju Samson there? Because they've created a selection headache that they didn't really need.
true. Yeah, it does seem like that. It also segues us into one of the conversations we'll have in a bit about opinions of,
Um,
of outsiders on Indian cricket. But
mm,
but I think they have caused an issue for themselves by bringing Shubman into this whole process of including him into T20 cricket. But I also think from an Indian cricket perspective, at all kind of eras of Indian cricket, you always had superstars, right? And they've backed a particular type of player, or they backed a particular player for the sake of Indian cricket, right? And I think that narrative is being continued to follow right now, to be followed right now. For example, in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s was Kapil Dev. Before that was Sunil Gavaskar. Then in the 90s was Sachin Tendulkar. Early 2000s, Sachin Tendulkar, Rahul Dravid, Saurav Ganguly, VVS Lakshman, Virender Sehwag came in. And then Yuvraj Singh, MS Dhoni, late 2000s. And then 2010s was Virat and Rohit. And then Surya temporarily, like for a little bit, came in the early 2020s, but now you can see it shifting towards Shubman Gill a little bit. You see it shifting towards Shreyas Iyer a little bit. You see it shifting. I think that's what's kind of also at play at this point in time, if not consciously, more subconsciously, because I think the marketing, the business narrative also takes precedence at this point in time, at least in the world we live in, right? So I
mm.
think that's perhaps also a part in play right now, which is why I think he's also brought in from that point of view, because you want certain superstars to take the game forward, right? For example, the Steve Smiths of the world, or the Stokeses of the world, and the Joe Roots of the world for England cricket and for Australian cricket respectively. Similarly, I think there are going to be superstars from each country, and I think Shubman's going to be one of them. Like Bumrah is, Ashwin was, Virat was, Rohit and Virat still are in ODI cricket. That Australian series is already a big hype that's revolved around that. So, so I think that is a part of the narrative as well. And I don't think the likes of a Sanju, given his hot and cold performances, have left him in a good place, which is why I think the contention about his spot, because someone like an Abhishek Sharma is at the very start of his career and has shown a lot of promise and a lot of potential, which he could also potentially be one of those big superstars, in Indian cricket. So I think that that's why he gets precedence there. Also left-hander, you will always get a little bit of precedence there.
A little bit of spin.
Little bit of spin. Sanju wicket keeps, is very, very good fielder. So he does bring his own versatility to the table. But I think with Shubman, that narrative of him being the next superstar from Indian cricket drives this a little bit more, more in his favor.
Sri Lanka are preparing for the Asia Cup at the moment by playing 50 over games against Zimbabwe. Does that basically tells you how important the Asia Cup is if there's a team literally preparing by playing 50 over cricket? I know they are going to play some T20s as well coming up. But it also just tells you that, like, the people who make these schedules, like, fine, you've got a series against Zimbabwe coming up, and I can completely understand that. But what is the point? What are they gaining out of it, playing 50 over cricket before a T20 tournament? It's so weird to me. And you and I could both make a tactical argument here of being maybe they want their players to work on something, bat longer and, whatever. But that isn't why this exists. This exists purely because someone went, oh, we're playing Zimbabwe, let's have 3 of these and 3 of these. It's like, don't we have to start actually moving the schedules to make sure it makes sense for your cricket team? Like, I can't imagine they're making any more money out of this than they would have playing 6 T20 games.
But it's also, I think, the revenue opportunities in a one-day game versus a T20 game. I think that drives it a lot more, and I think this is a source of revenue for these teams, and they're looking at it from that point of view as well, yeah. Because
I think in the old days that was the case. I don't think that works as much anymore.
But that's the
even
thing,
5 years ago, that was still the case. I'm not sure now.
No, but Jarrod, with a lot of but a lot of these teams, right, their revenue is pretty short, to be very honest. Like, if you think about it, like Zimbabwe's cricketing revenue and then Sri Lanka's cricketing revenue, given their geopolitical situations right now, they're all trying to stay afloat. Like, outside of England, Australia, India, and maybe, I don't know, South Africa to a certain degree, the other countries are not really, like, afloat. And, the whole, like, I was speaking to someone in Hong Kong cricket, and they were telling me how important the India-Pakistan game is to them, because a lot of the revenue from, like, majority of the revenue from the Asia Cup gets dispersed into a lot of the Asian Cricket Council associations. So for them, like, it could be a political thing. And you're saying I understand it being a political thing for India, but this is our bread and butter. We won't be able to exist if this game doesn't happen, because that revenue comes to us. So it tells you a story of how dire the situation is for a lot of the cricketing administrative associations, because they have to keep things afloat, which is why you see something as haphazard as a Sri Lanka-Zimbabwe one-day series before the Asia Cup, because it brings in that kind of revenue, right?
No. I'm not saying it doesn't bring in revenue. I'm saying that if you're going to play a one-day World Cup or a Champions Trophy and it's 50 overs, then obviously it makes sense to play these games as 50 over games, right? And if not, it makes sense to play these games as 6 T20 games. I don't think the revenue, and I could be wrong, and if there's a TV person listening, but my understanding is that it's switched now, and that international games no longer, it used to be if you played an international game, you made a lot more money off an ODI than you did a T20. I don't think that's the case anymore. In fact, from what I understand of having talked to TV executives 2 or 3 years ago, was that it's already started to flip. And that T20s, even though you don't have as many ads. So if you're going to do it, just put them in the right area. I mean, you're right to say they should be making decisions based on finances as much as cricket, right? Because eventually you have to be able to pay your players. You have to be able to pay for everything else.
Yeah.
But if it just doesn't seem to be the best preparation for an Asia Cup to be playing 50 over
Unfortunately not.
cricket right at the moment. I don't know. That's just me. Obviously, we'll be talking a lot more about the Asia Cup in the next couple of weeks. DP World, if you're listening, we're waiting for your
Yes,
call.
we're desperately waiting for your call, buddy. And call us, let us know what's happening, because there's so much for us to do.
Yeah, and obviously Robbie's already in Dubai, and I'm happy to get on a
Yeah.
plane. Let's talk about Cheteshwar Pujara. There's a perfect example, by the way, of when I started commentating on him and started writing about him. Cricinfo quite often used Che Pujara, by the way, not Cheteshwar, and of course, Che is not always the best phrase in Indian culture, and Cheteshwar is it's better than calling him Steve. But
Yeah.
a perfect example of someone like that. He's had because of the way that his career is finished, some of his cultural impact as a cricketer has diminished by the time he's retired from this level of cricket. But at his peak, he was so important to this side.
Oh, he was incredibly important. I think a lot of Indian team success, basically, comes from the fact that he was able to hold one end up for India, away from India, especially the success abroad, right, while batting. I think he was able to hold one end up, and I think that was really important. There were guys around him who were playing aggressively, and in fact, there was a period of time in his career where he was forced to play aggressively, or he was not going to be like he was asked to up his strike rate in Test cricket from under 50 to at least 70, right? And we saw a period of a few Test matches where Puji was batting like we've never seen Puji bat before, And I think there was a particular England series, if I'm not wrong. I think it was a 2018 England series where he was like just deeply uncomfortable, but he had to do it if he had to survive being in the Indian side. And he went through all of that, but he came back to what works for him, and he stood true with that. And I think he probably overextended his stay a little bit. I think it was communicated to him that he probably will not be considered in Test cricket anymore. And I think it was this England tour was probably the final straw, where he probably felt, okay, now they're not going to look at me. And then we're at the start of a new cycle, and it seemed very bleak for Indian cricket to go back to the likes of a Pujara or a Rahane at the start of a new cycle, right? Of a new Test cycle. You'd see them probably go to a youngster and develop a youngster, or give someone new an opportunity, which is essentially what they did. But it's worked for India. I think Indian Test cricket is in safe hands at the moment. But I think that's where he overextended his stay a little bit. I reckon when he didn't get picked in that Australian tour, he could have called time. But obviously, it's very hard, right? It's obviously very hard to call time on your career when it's everything that you are as a human being, right? You've spent your entire childhood developing the skills to be this version of yourself. And to let go of that version of yourself is not easy. It's an emotionally tumultuous kind of process, and you need to be able to be at peace to make that decision. And I think that time that we felt okay he could have called time was probably the time when he went through a lot of turmoil internally to make peace with himself before he called time on his career. But an incredible career he's had.
He's an interesting guy. So I'd never met him before until this summer, and I spent maybe 15, 20 minutes talking to him. I tell you why. I gave him a copy of the book, and I asked for a copy of his wife's book, which I've read about the first 3 or 4 chapters of. I've met a lot of cricketers in my life. I don't know if I've ever met a cricketer who's more polite, gentle is maybe a word I would use. And he gets compared to Rahul Dravid. Rahul Dravid's polite and gentle, but he's not like Pujara. Pujara's on a level of which
extremely soft-spoken.
Yeah, and you read, as I said, I've read about the first 3 or 4 chapters of the book. So I think I've read like the dating portion of the book. And his wife is shocked by this, like before they get together. Like she's writing about it in the book of being like, he doesn't act like you would expect a cricketer to act. Does he stand out even within Indian cricket as that kind of a person? Or am I just, because I spent so much time with Australians and South Africans and English players, I'm just, not used to players being normal, nice human beings? See how I just slandered an entire load of cricket for no reason there. Okay.
So I think Indian cricket kind of does this to you, because it's obviously a patriarchic kind of system, right? And a lot of favorites, cultural politics are at play at all points, and you have to be like you're more preferred as a choice in teams if you are not problematic in a sense of if you're
Yeah.
uncontroversial, fly under the radar, humble, soft spoken, that's when
Not Sri
you're kind
Sant.
of okay, yeah, you could say that. Where you don't have a like a unique personality, but you should kind of create that personality within, staying on flying under the radar, like on in a broad spectrum. And so he has been able to balance that really, really finely. Has Puji? Puji, I think, balanced that exceptionally well. I'm telling you, he's one of those guys who seems very meek and gentle to speak to, but you really see that like the fire in his eyes when he's holding
Yeah.
a bat, right? It is unmistakable, right? I remember in a it was a first class game, Karnataka versus Saurashtra, right? 2009. I think he got a triple hundred against Karnataka in the league game, or 2010, 9-10. Yeah, he got a triple hundred, and our man was batting 200 odd end of days play. And then I went early in the morning to have a hit, because they were about 6 or 7 wickets down. And this guy rocks up at 7:30 in the morning, after scoring a double hundred, and batted the same amount of time that I batted before going into bat for the game. Right. So match starts at 9:30. So he was batting from 7:30 to about 8:45, and then got ready for batting. So it was like, for him as a personality, he was obsessed with batting, and he was obsessed with being not out. Do you know that through his underage cricket till he played under 19, so under 14s, under 16s, in all of those crickets nationally, right? When he played under 14 Saurashtra in the national tournaments, right? And then under 16 national tournaments, he did not have an average because he did not get out. He did not get out in underage cricket. It was only after he went to under 19, I think, or beyond that, when he had a very big first class average as well. But he was someone who just did not get out. And there's a fascinating story to it. I don't think it's my place to share that story, but it told me so much about him as a human being, that he had to, like, for example, okay, not for example, this is okay, I'll just tell you the gist of it. So basically, the story goes that Puji came from the opposition side of the administrative side that ran Saurashtra cricket, right? He was one of the sons of the administrators on the other side, or the opposition of who ran Saurashtra cricket. So for him, growing up, his dad, I think, told him that it doesn't matter how many runs you score, you just cannot get out. You cannot get out. I don't care how you bat, but you cannot get out. You cannot give them a reason to not pick you. And so, literally through under 14, under 16 cricket, he did not get out, Jar. And that stayed with him. And that tells you a story behind how he developed himself as a player. He probably had, and Ashwin's also gone on to say that he's one of the most stubborn people I've met. It's because that was what he was taught, and that is what he taught himself, and that is the foundations on which his cricket was built. So that is the kind of personality that he is, and he had to be stubborn with it, right? For you to stay not out and make peace with yourself of scoring runs at a very slow clip, you have to be stubborn at a very deep level. So that is why he was the kind of quality of player, and that's why he has that resilience. We saw the epitome of it perhaps in the Australia series, where he just caught every blow there was to catch and stood tall and took India to victories that was just mind-boggling, right? That series, just even to witness, was mind-boggling. But that's where the resilience came from the fact that he just could not get out as a youngster. And for me, when you look at him like from that perspective, there is this personality that you see in front, but there's that tiger hiding behind that personality that comes out when he plays cricket. which for me is truly phenomenal. Like the complexities of personalities that you will meet in this sport based on where they come, especially in India, you'll see that because culturally we're so different from one state to the other. And he comes from a state that has 3 state associations. There are 3 cricket associations in Gujarat. There's Baroda, there's Gujarat, and there's Saurashtra. And I've played for Saurashtra for 2 years. And I can tell you, it's a great place. The cricketers are probably some of the best in the country. I've not seen a team that is more united than them. They are so united. There's one cricket ground. That cricket stadium is the only ground they have. There's one solid international quality training facility that's in that stadium. Everything starts and ends in that stadium. And it's got everything for the cricketers. And those guys are, when I say family, they're like brothers. You know, brothers that go to war. I've had an incredible time playing cricket with them for those 2 years. Phenomenal bunch of boys. And they all look up to Puji, Chedev Unatkat as their like inspirations. Because these guys from that association who never really has too much of a say in, like, as a small association, right? If you imagine in Gujarat cricket, which association will have the biggest say? Probably Gujarat, right?
Yeah.
But guys from Baroda and guys from Saurashtra, if they have to make it to the Indian team, they have to stand out and then some. And Puji is one of those guys who stood out head and shoulders far ahead than anyone else in Indian cricket. So for me, I think that's why I feel like he should be celebrated so much more as a cricketer, because the complexities through which he navigated through to become the cricketer he became and put out performances is just...
It's so fascinating, some of the stuff that you were talking about there. The story about him, you know, being not out and coming back to the nets reminds me of, I think Graham Gooch made 300 against...
Yeah.
Was it 300 against India, or was it 200
India?
against
I
West
think
Indies?
India.
It was one of the big scores he made, and then he finished that and came straight back and was in the nets doing facing throwdowns in Essex. Yeah. And I think it was Nasser Hussain just being like, "You don't have to do that," like, you know. But that those sorts of guys, and probably very similar sorts of people in some ways. Those two sort of guys who just want to keep batting, you know, very polite when you meet them, but underneath, as you say, there's that tiger. The other thing is, you talk about the Australian series. I think I've got 2 memories of Pujara. One is being in Ranchi, watching him face Steve Smith for 4 days. It wasn't 4 days, but it felt like 4 days of just, not Steve Smith, Steve O'Keefe, sorry. Just bowling to him and him just being halfway down the wicket to O'Keefe every delivery. But the other one is, have you ever seen the pitch map of Pat Cummins from that series against India, where there isn't a wide ball bowled? Pat Cummins, I think it was the peak of a fast bowler being accurate that we've ever seen in cricket, right? Yeah. I think the next generation, that will be more regular. But even Bumrah pushes the odd ball down the leg side, right? Occasionally goes wide, everything else. Go back and have a look at that pitch map of Pat Cummins from that entire series. And everyone remembers all the times Pujara got hit. They forgot the fact that there were no loose balls, right? Yeah. And when he got a loose ball, I think there's one cut shot he plays in that series, right?
There's the
because suddenly he's like, oh my God, I can play this shot. Like, you'd almost see him go, I've been waiting 15 days for a ball like this from Pat Cummins, right? Yeah. And so it just shows you the sort of the level, and those two are very different kinds of things. One is in Ranchi on a wicket that he's quite used to and almost impossible to get out. But the fact that he was down the wicket and was just saying, you're just not going to be able to dismiss me no matter what you do on this wicket. And then the opposite is taking the body blows in Australia, but also still showing that patience and literally punching Australia out by taking the ball on the body and leaving the ball outside off stump. I don't think people understand the incredible mental abilities that you have to be that kind of player. And, you know, when I was talking, you know, to people for the book, there was a lot of players that were like, we don't have that patience, right? They're talking about players like Pujara and Dravid and Alistair Cook and just going, we see that as like this, oh, anyone can be patient. No one can be patient like them. It's an elite skill to have that a normal human being would not even get close to.
Yeah, I remember that. I saw a few players do this, right? I saw Rahul Dravid do this in Adelaide once, where he was 0 of 40 balls or something, and then he got off the mark to a front foot defensive shot to Bretley, and then raised his bat, like 40 balls without scoring a run, right? Pujara going like half a session without scoring a run. Murali Vijay batting on 99 for half an hour before getting a run to score his 100. Like, this takes a level of, resilience that very few actually have, right? And that is something that needs to be celebrated. That is something that's rare amongst us humans, right? And to make peace with the fact that you are going to catch blows at 145, 150 clicks an hour, and you're going to try and protect yourself as much as possible, but make peace with the fact of catching blows from some of the best bowlers in the world. It's not easy, man. I can promise you. Like if
I would ask
anyone's
you about
ever
this.
gotten hit by a cricket ball, like I can promise you, it's not an easy decision to say, okay, I'm going to catch blows. It's fine. I'll catch my blows and I will do this because I want to do it. I want to do this for myself. I want to do this for my team, and I want to do this because I want to win. Right?
I think it's
And
easy. I think it's easy to make the decision to catch blows if you're a person who doesn't feel pain in the way that other people do, right? Like I think that's easy. What I don't think is easy is to do that while still batting normally, right? Because that switch
or
between
batting with
those two
broken
things,
fingers.
yeah, because you can kind of steal you could steal your body for like it's gonna hit me, it's gonna hit me, but to do that and still be light on your feet, take advantage of the wide ball, look for singles, right? Rotate, all that. That's the thing of like you now again we're talking about before of these are elite skills that people don't truly understand, right? Like it's
Yeah.
easy to do one thing in batting at one time. Right? Like, when it doesn't happen as much these days, but you get those pitches in the old days that would just like completely lose steam and you bat out for a draw like Faf du Plessis and AB de Villiers. And everyone's like, oh, you should do that all the time. It's like, those wickets don't actually exist that much. And batters like doing that. It's a fun thing to sometimes go, I'm going to bat for a day and a half and I'm just going to dead bat everything with no backlift. It's much harder when you're trying to play out for a draw, but the ball's still coming through and things are still happening and everything else, right? And it's really hard. So with Pujara, it's not that he ever made one decision. It's that he was able to still bat normally, or his version of normally, while taking blows on the body, while not playing a shot, right? And all these sorts of things. That's why I always felt it's not one-dimensional, it's multi-dimensional, right?
Yeah, 100%. And the thing is, even dead batting, right? That takes a lot of discipline, bro. Like it takes a lot of self-awareness to say, I'm gonna dead bat everything for the rest of the day and save this test match. You think it's easy? No, because instincts take over. Suddenly you're dead batting an overpitched ball, and then if you haven't come into one particular ball with the same level of self-awareness that you've come throughout the innings so far, the next full pitch delivery, instinctively you'll get a higher backlift and you'll go for it, and then halfway through the shot you'll pull out of it and then you'll nick it and go back to the keeper, right? And then you're gone. And then so it takes a lot of discipline. You think it's an easy thing or an easy endeavor to navigate through. It isn't. It actually is extremely challenging to stay super disciplined and aware of every shot that you play, every ball that you face, which is why it's called Test cricket, isn't it? But he's someone who's done that with a large amount of success, which is why I think he's celebrated as much as he is. And I think his personality is also pretty subdued. So I think the celebration of his career has been quite subdued in that sense, right? And he's not
Yeah.
someone who'll ever offend anybody, right? He's never someone who'll ever offend anyone. So today, even as a broadcaster, you'll see him, kind of walking the diplomatic road a lot more than one that has strong opinions, right? Because that's just the nature of
I
the
talked to him
human
about
being.
that. I said, how are you trying to find your way? And it was really, it was like you were talking to him about his batting, and he's like, yeah, like I'm trying to understand what my voice is and what I want to say and who I want to be. And he was like, you could see him working through the gears of what commentary was
Yeah.
to him, and it shows you exactly who he is. Look, I think it's a fantastic career. I think someone put in the comments before, he played in the early 2000s, he would have ended up averaging over 50. It's probably not quite that much, but he batted in a very tough era. And also he was a brilliant player of spin who during his career, the wicket started to rag sideways, and it didn't matter how good a player he was of spin anymore because, and the last thing I would add is I think he might be the last great player with footwork in international cricket to be able to
I
come
agree.
down the wicket, because spinners are getting so much quicker. I just don't think young players will have the same opportunities
No.
to get as good as he got.
No.
And I remember looking at at all the CricViz stats of people coming down the wicket. It's basically Pujara and Michael Clark. There was already a drop off, right? Even when Pujara was playing, there wasn't another guy coming through who used his feet the way that those two guys did. And I'm not sure we'll ever see anyone again do what Pujara did. So he might be the last man with great footwork to spin, or great coming down the wicket footwork to spin that we'll ever see.
And the timing of him stepping out, Jared, like, oh man, dude, that is a masterclass, dude. Like, and I've seen this thousands of times, right? Thousands. I mean, in the thousands. He has like it would be, and every single time, as soon as the ball's left the bowler's hand, he's out, like in a flash. And he's not stepping out to hit a six. He's stepping out to hit twos.
Yeah.
He's stepping out
Or
to
defend.
nudge the ball. Yeah, he's stepping out to defend. Stepping out to just push the ball into the gaps to take a single. Like, and it's like he mastered it so much that it wasn't a risky shot to him. It was actually
No.
a defensive option to him. Do you know how good you have to be at a particular skill to use an aggressive option as a defensive option?
I think this is going to sound really weird, and maybe this is just being a crap cricketer. I find it so much harder to come down the wicket and defend than I do to come down the wicket and attack. And I don't know if it's about the actual physical momentum of going
It's
through.
the mindset as well.
Yeah, I could never work it out. I reckon I haven't been stumped that much in my career, maybe 6 or 7 times. I would say 6 of them though are probably defensive shots or pushing for one. If
Yeah.
I come down the wicket, I might go out, but I'll hit it straight up in the air, right?
Yeah,
But
exactly.
when I come down the wicket to defend, I'm like completely lost. And he, as you said, he's using an attacking option to defend, and then also he's doing it in a way that he's almost, I wouldn't say he just doesn't believe he's going to be stumped. He doesn't even see that as a valid way that you could dismiss him. I think that's incredible.
Yeah. Truly incredible. Man, that guy's got some fight in him.
How do we talk about someone who's retiring from just the IPL? How do we talk about Ashwin's career now? Like, no, I mean that in a real way. Like, are we talking about him as an overall cricketer, or do we just go Ashwin the IPL cricketer? Because I think Ashwin the IPL cricketer is quite interesting because it kind of makes retired outs popular, kind of makes mancats popular. He becomes a pinch blocker, which is the term I used for Imran Khan in the '92 World Cup, and I'm still keeping on with it. This guy who can play against spin, but is limited later on. Like he's a good bat, but you don't want him batting at number 7 because he doesn't really have the power of a number 7. You actually want him to come in early on. He's a really flexible, interesting player, but he's probably not individually one of the great, if you look at Rashid Khan and, Sunil Narayan, he's not on their level of spin, right? But we actually know he's a better bowler than them. No, in the IPL.
In
No, in the IPL. Yeah. But we know, that's what I mean. But we know he's a better bowler than them because we've seen him do it in every format. So he's got this weird IPL legacy, right? Of, and you and I talked about it recently of, does he want to go and be a role player anymore? Or does he want to be a star? I think he's kind of made it pretty clear that he didn't want to be a role player in the IPL and move forward. But yeah, where does Ashwin the player end up as when we're talking about IPL? Like, how do you think about him as an IPL player alone?
For me, Ashwin, the player, I think his legacy as an IPL player won't be as great as his legacy as an international player simply because of the options he utilized after a certain point. He used a lot of defensive options in the IPL compared to the offensive options that he used in international cricket, especially in Test cricket. He used his guile and his spin a lot more. He didn't really, like, I think it was post 2014 perhaps, he stopped using the off spinner as much and went more to the carom ball and the leg spin, and he did a lot more. I honestly wish he used his off spin a lot more because I think he's got a great undercutter, and I think that would have left a lot of batters like flummoxed, to be very honest. But I don't think he used those options very much, and I think that's why it's such a mixed bag for him in the IPL. And also, I think a lot was happening to him through his IPL career as well. So his bowling, his primary skill became more of a secondary objective because I think there was, once the captaincy came to him in 2017 or 18, then the controversies also happened because of the run out at the bowling end, which I think was phenomenal. I think he actually brought in a lot of fairness into the game through that. And like I like how initially batters thought it is their birthright that they could leave, and how can the bowler do something like I was like, what the heck are you talking about? Like you're cutting the crease before the ball's delivered. And that is uncalled for, and that is wrong on your part. So if he doesn't need to give you a warning. Like you're essentially cheating. Why? Like then a bowler should be allowed to bowl a no ball, right? Whenever he wants to bowl. Like if you're allowed to leave the crease early, then he should be allowed to bowl a no ball whenever he wants to bowl.
It's
So
funny
like
that line would move when a bowler was there. It was set in stone, and when a batter was there, it
yeah,
was like, well, it's optional now.
yeah.
We have to give
Why
him
is
a
it optional?
warning. He didn't
Yeah.
mean to walk out of his
Oh,
crease
that's
early.
bullshit.
I
Yeah.
didn't mean to bowl a no ball either.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true. And just to go back to the year he bowled leg spin, for instance, which I still think is one of the more fascinating things that someone has done in modern T20 cricket. I think he used the IPL as kind of like a petri dish at times, right? To experiment with things,
Possibly.
right? And he would come in. There's that great interview he did with my friend Subash years ago, where he's basically like, I think maybe 6 well-constructed bad balls is the way to go. Like he was so ahead of his thinking when it came to
Yeah.
T20 cricket, but it didn't suit his individual skill sets in the way that it does Rashid Khan or Sunil Narayan or some Imran Tahir, right? I'm not saying all those guys are always better than him, but it suited their skill sets perfectly in that format, going up against those players. Whereas actually his true genius is probably bowling on the second day of a pitch in a test match where it's not doing all that much, and he can find a way or find an angle or find a speed that will work for him and everything else. So I think he's a very fascinating T20 cricketer from that
He is.
perspective.
In general, a fascinating individual. Like I
Yeah.
think, he's very forward-thinking, slightly ahead of the game at most points, like all-time good. That's a little unfair to say.
That's a phrase that we've been using quite a lot on
Have
Good Areas,
you?
is all-time good. Yeah, because not everyone is an all-time great, but an all-time good is still an incredible player, right?
Yeah.
I didn't say it. I didn't say you're an all-time good, but Varun might put that up on the screen in a minute. But yeah, no, I do. I just think he's a really fascinating cricketer and always has been. As you say, he's
I
fascinating.
think
off
he'll
the
actually
field.
make a fascinating coach.
I don't
It'll be
think he'll become a
interesting to
coach.
I think his life is going to be way more enterprising than getting stuck in a coach's job, because a coach's job is like, he'd probably be a mentor of sorts. I think that'll be a
Yeah.
great role for him. But he could be a coach. He could be a head coach in the IPL. Some of them, there could be some takers for him. If he can build a good team around him, he could be
I don't think he can't be a coach. I think he'd be a great coach. I don't think that's where he's positioning himself post-retirement. I think it's much more likely that he's looking at media and everything else.
Media
If-
for
if
sure.
he's-
As in, I think he was ahead of the curve with that, and he started something in 2015 or 16 that a lot of us in Indian cricket were scared to do, because you get tagged as a particular thing, and this is our main source of income, right? And then suddenly you're looked at, your perception shifts completely, right? It's only after Ashwin did it and me and DK did it that people are even willing to have their own YouTube channels and but now it's like at the other end of the extreme, I think. But yeah, I think he was ahead of the curve.
Yeah, I think he could do so much more. And I've mentioned this before, but I talked to his management group and his wife and all the, his confidants and everything about this. I still think that he hasn't even scratched the surface of what he could do with his YouTube channel, and that it could be incredible. It'll be interesting to see now if he kind of unfurls that a little bit more, because I think he has some issues with commentary, in that he's a little bit like me, and probably a little bit like you as well, but certainly more like me, in that he probably says things slightly before he thinks about the repercussions of what he said, and that does not work particularly well. That's why I haven't worked on TV. I've had TV producers tell me that. It's like, we can't have you on because you will say the thing that we can't have being said, right? And I'm like, no, I can behave. They might be right. I don't know, but I think he will have trouble keeping all the powers that be on side. But if he has his own YouTube and everything else, he could turn that into the biggest. His YouTube channel /podcast network, if it was run correctly, and it can't just be him coming on when he's got a free half an hour. But if it's run correctly and done professionally like the Americans, could be bigger than Cricket Info.
Yeah, sure. I think so as well. I think he's incredibly good at what he does, and he's got a decent team around him, and he's focused a little bit more regionally. But I think
Yes.
if his focus shifts global, it might be a slow burn initially, but I think he will be phenomenal.
I
And
think he's the chance of cricket finally having, this a great sort of podcaster, YouTuber, content creator, whatever you want to say. Those, the sort of he's cricket's best chance because I think everyone in cricket knows him and respects him. He does think you and I may not agree with everything he says, but we know he's thinking it through, right? Like
yeah,
there's a reason why he's saying it, even if
saying
you
something.
and I might come from a different angle. And I think he's captivating. Like I really
Yeah, he
like the
is.
way he goes about it. But it'd be interesting to go. I shouldn't be talking about any of this though, because I'm talking about Indian cricketers, and Sunil Gavaskar has come out this week and said, now I wanted to run this past you. So for those who don't know, Sunil Gavaskar basically has come out and said that it doesn't matter how many test matches you've played or how many times you've been to India, you shouldn't be allowed to talk about the Indian team if you're not Indian. I wanted to run that past you, Robbie, because you have a co-host who literally talks about the Indian team and everything else all the time. Because there's some things he's got wrong in this, right? Which both of us will probably pick up on here. I've done a video on this, which will be up on the site in a couple of days. There's some things he's got wrong on this, but there's some things he's got right on this as well,
Mm.
which is a lot of people from major cricket countries around the world for 50 or 60 years didn't care about the Indian team, had no interest in the Indian team. And suddenly now that there is financial incentive, right, with the Indian team, they're very, very interested in what is going on and everything else. But the thing that is missed within all that is everything is aiming towards India now. And it's very hard to cover modern cricket without actually covering India because there's so much more news, so much more coverage. And when the IPL's on, there's almost no other international cricket to feature. So, of course, people have an opinion on Shreyas Iyer, right? Because they've all been following the IPL and watching him bat.
Yeah, I think what the point he was driving there, I think, was the fact that this is done from a more financial
Yep.
perspective than a opinion perspective, right? I don't think he means people should like. I think it was a very it was a differently approached way to kind of say, listen, like we know why you're doing this, and your opinion doesn't matter in this regard, in that sense, right? Because the underlying use case of Indian cricket for a lot of people outside of India is the views, right?
Yeah.
Is the revenue
But
it generates
it's
for them.
also worth saying it's exactly the same within India.
Yeah,
That
it is.
isn't
Yeah,
that isn't any different within. In fact, I'd say there are some cricket cultures that are still nervous about going towards India too much. Whereas in India, like there is so much exploitation of the Indian team for financial gain, right? So it's
yeah, of
exactly the
course.
same inside as outside. But what he's saying is
Yeah,
it's ours, which also makes sense.
yeah, yeah. And so it's right and it's wrong, I think. But he's trying to speak to a certain set of people, perhaps.
Brad Haddon and
And
AB de Villiers.
yeah, it's I think it's targeted towards that. And I think that's the motive. And I think for me, he's the grand old man of Indian cricket. I love Sunny G. Sunny G is a phenomenal human being. He's the cutest guy, and he has such great stories, man. I was telling Sunny G, sir, please just like write a book, like of all the stories you've seen and grown up and witnessed from the time you've been a kid about Indian cricket. It'll be such an enriching book for anyone who loves the sport. And I said, bro, the stories he's got, my God, they are so endearing. They're so beautiful, and he takes you through different eras of cricketers, right? And Indian cricket, and at a time when it's like post-British Indian cricket, right? And then the hangovers of that, and the Parsis, and the Maharashtrians, and the Kings, and the royalty, and then you move into the gentlemen of the game. And then you move from that to the working class playing the game, the middle class playing the game, and then he's been through all of those different eras, man. It's phenomenal. So I really hope that him and his son Rohan actually encapsulate this in a book, and I hope that's there to share for the world to listen to about Indian cricket and his experience just within the sport. I think it's so rich, and I think for him being for me, the granddaddy of Indian cricket. For me, I think he has the right to say anything. He can say it, and I'll agree with him.
But you
For the
don't
most
agree
part.
because you're on
For
the
the most
podcast
part.
with me. Yeah, look, it's an interesting one because
See, the thing
part
is,
of it
this is
is-
your job. See, the thing is, this is your job, right?
Yes.
And this is what you do, and you talk about cricket all around the world, right? So I don't think it was targeted towards blokes like you, right? I think it was about
No.
guys who generally don't have an opinion, don't care about Indian cricket, have not a lot of good things to say about Indian cricket for the most part. And then they double down on situations that can only seem beneficial to them in one particular way. I think he's talking to those people.
Yeah, it's really tricky. So I'll do a video on Indian cricket, right? And someone will be like, "Oh, you're just trying to cash in on Indian cricket. Look, you've done this video." And I'm like, "Well, what about the last 6 videos that have been about Zimbabwe players' shoes
Exactly,
and
yeah.
some other random historic thing?" The only reason you're noticing this is because you notice things about India more often.
India cricket, yeah.
And so if like I don't listen to Brad Haddon's podcast, but I get I'm on the algorithm, so I get a lot of the clips from his show, right? And it's not just his show. I forget the main host of it, but Alyssa Healy's on it as well. And they have some really interesting discussions. I don't agree with all of it, but some of it's really, really good and some great stories from it. It feels like 3 cricket people talking about cricket, right? Which is
Yeah.
what you want from a podcast.
Yeah.
How many times have they not talked about India, or they've talked about another country because Brad Haddon's got an opinion on some other country where this doesn't become an issue? And I think that's the thing. And I'm not defending them because I don't listen to their podcast enough. Maybe it is all about India, but my algorithm doesn't suggest that it is. AB de Villiers is a little bit different because I think he does do a lot of content about India, but I also feel that he actually played more with Indian players towards the end of his career than he did with anyone else. Like he wasn't playing
Yeah.
a lot of franchise cricket everywhere else.
But I
right?
also think a big part of his fame also comes from his superstardom here in India. And
Yes.
AB is very aware of that, and he loves that. He respects that a lot and values that a lot. And so he kind of tries to cater to the people who've made him as big as he is, right?
Agree.
And notwithstanding his game and his prowess and his greatness within the game. I'm talking about things attached to his game. So I think he wants to continue to serve those people through this medium, which is why he does what he does, you know. And which is why a lot of his videos or his stuff on YouTube is a lot more about Indian cricket, you know, because he loves Indian cricket, you know, and I think he kind of feels that he wants to kind of serve all of his fans here in India, which I think is also nice, you know. For me,
No, I
one
get
of the things that I think I have, like, it's like a pet peeve of mine where I'm like, there are people who come and use Indian cricket literally like tissue paper, right? Those are the people that I think in general, you know, people who are in the sport have a problem with. You know what I mean?
I know who
Stop
you
it.
mean. I know exactly who you mean.
No, you don't. You probably know 5% of.
I don't know. I know one person. If I said it, you'd be
Perhaps
like,
you
"Oh,
know.
don't bring him up again." But no,
No,
I
but
think that's
but
fair.
because
But-
I'm telling you, but these people come to India and they are racial towards Indians, right? And
Yeah,
they
no,
are,
no.
you know, we see that and we hate it. You might be some of the biggest cricketers, you might be one of the biggest cricketers from your country, maybe even in world cricket, but you can't come to India and treat Indians like shit, right? And we see a lot of that, right? And it's and we see it. The racism, you can go to, like, you know, when someone's treating you racially unfairly, right? It's in our bones. We grew up in that, right? And so we're here in a position of power. We've built ourselves up, and no one's done us any favors. We've done it by ourselves, right? And so we deserve to be respected in our world. But if you come to our world where you're earning your bread and butter and you're going to treat us like crap, the number of incidents that have happened just in the IPL, man, it's been absolutely like shocking. We'll never talk about it, but that's also an underlying thing. We see it across the board, not just with players playing, but with broadcasters, with production. You see it, you experience it. The way you're spoken to is so different from the way they speak to people of the same color that that they belong to, right? We see it, and it feels like just right now it just seems funny, like, oh my god, like really we got to go through this now. It's not annoying anymore. It's just like, it
I
doesn't
think
matter, we can push them aside.
I think that's the interesting thing is where anyone who was upset at Sana Gavaska's comments last week has got to remember that he's lived a life of that.
Exactly.
Right. So I did the book, which is apparently just behind you on the shelf there. I don't know
There it
why
is.
it's not open with the pen marks all over it, but anyway, when I was doing the book, one of the big things was, oh, you've got Sana Gavaska too high, and I went, I actually think the world had him too low the whole time, right? And one of the reasons is, and this is a cricket cultural thing, not a racial cultural thing, of if someone's really good against fast bowling, they're awesome. If someone's really good against spin bowling, it's, oh, well, there's no courage involved in spin bowling. As we just said, if Pujara's standing halfway down the crease, half of his innings, there's courage. It's a different kind of courage, right?
Yeah.
But there is a huge amount of courage within that. And so there is a cultural bias because from 1950s onwards, Australia, South Africa, and England basically stopped bowling spin, right? Before that, the way you played spin was really highly valued, right? And then it becomes the way that you play pace. And there are brutal reasons for that, and there are all sorts of things. But Gavaska's lived through all of that sort of stuff. And as I said before, he's lived through India being ignored. And now he's looking at a player like Brad Haddon, who, I don't want to put words in Sana Gavaska's mouth, but Sana Gavaska would be like, look, a very good player, but he's not like a great of the game. He's got a podcast. Why is he talking about Shreyas Iyer? But the other side of that is that the way the algorithm works, Brad Haddon might talk about 20 different players, and the only time that Sana Gavaska is going to hear anything that Brad Haddon talks about is when he talks about Shreyas Iyer, right?
Yeah,
That's the way the algorithm works now, and you can't get away. The reason I heard about this story, if Kumar Sangakkara said the exact same things, right, I wouldn't have heard about it because it wouldn't have gone through the algorithm because 40 people wouldn't have shared it in front of my eyes, right? 40 people wouldn't have commented about it and everything else. So straight away, because it's about India, it's bigger. The other thing is, and we saw this a little bit with Australia in the 90s and 2000s, the player who doesn't make the side, right, the 16th best player of a normal cricket side, no one even knows who they are, right? No one's sitting there going, oh, Tim Seifert, what's going on with him? Why can't he get more games, right? That's not how it works. When you are the biggest team in the world, when you are the Australian cricket team of the 2000s, when you are the USA men's basketball team, when you are the Indian men's team now, right, everyone has an opinion because we've all been watching them, right? Because they're the biggest team in the world. So they become part of the news, right? Part of the cycle of how these things go. And again, if you're Sana Gavaska, you didn't grow up with that. Yeah. You grew up with picking your side and no one had any opinions. I will say this, though. He did say, Robbie, that, these other people shouldn't be talking about the Indian team. Do you want to know how long it took me on a Google to see him talking about other team selection? It wasn't long, Robbie. It wasn't long for me to find him talking about other team selection. So, look, I think we can all have a bit of fun with everything, but we do understand that there is a cultural shift going on within the game. And because modern sports coverage or content is so algorithmic, someone like Michael Vaughan can speak about Sri Lankan cricket like 20 times in a row, speak about Indian cricket once, and you see that Indian clip 20 times, and you don't see any of the Sri Lankan clips at all. But this is now a global game, and the way that we talk about it is very different to the way that it was during Sana Gavaska's time.
Yeah, sure. And for me, one of the things that, like I think that, even now, this whole thing about Sunny G being, like, we're talking about him and, like, and saying that, okay, you know what, anyone can talk about the sport. Like, but there are lines that you, for example, don't cross, right? For example, that whole Slapgate thing that happened in the IPL, right?
Which is back in the news again because of Lalit Modi and Michael Clark.
Man? Like, how does someone like that get away with stuff like that? Now, imagine we put up a clip of something that an Australian did, right? That was offensive, that was kept under wraps for the respect of that whole situation and to save the embarrassment of that whole situation, which is an impulsive bad decision that a human being made. Now, just because you've gone and you've interviewed somebody, you interviewed a person, and you've got access to that file, right? You think it's right for you to just publish it to the world and make those two people go through that whole emotion, that raw emotion, 20 years later? Like, where is your sense of sensitivity and empathy for other people? Like, it's not like we all make mistakes, but are we going to keep putting that out there to make people go through the embarrassment of the wrong choices a person's made? And for me, it's guys guys who aren't brown skinned who get away with it a lot more. Right? Today here we're talking about Sunny G having an opinion about what other people speak about Indian cricket. But what about something like this? This is not even spoken about. Like, imagine the human implication of this, right? On just Bajupa and Srishant. They have to go through the whole thing over again.
The only reason it was spoken about is because Srishant's wife put up a message, right? And that message, the message that she put up, which is very similar to what you've said now, went viral. I actually don't mind any journalist of any nationality going off and doing a deep dive into that whole situation as a journalist. But that's not what we saw here.
Yeah,
right?
It wasn't.
This is
you
just
have to have the sensitivity to actually have a conversation with those said individuals, seek their permission, and put a disclaimer out that a conversation's been had with these personalities to put this video out. Their emotions and their sentiments need to be respected. You can't treat people like crap just because it'll get you more views. That is unacceptable.
Yeah, I think it's a really, really interesting one. And also, and I'm assuming other people have said what you've said. But again, it feels like if it hadn't have been Srishant's wife who had come out, it probably just gets accepted, right? So there is an element of that. And Lalit Modi has to take his own, play his own part in that as well. And to be fair to Michael Clarke, he's not really, I suppose he's been in the industry a long time now. But he's not really like a producer or a journalist or anything like that. And so but unfortunately now, if you run your own podcast, you don't have a choice, right? If you're Akash Chopra and you say something wrong on your YouTube channel, it still makes news and you have to handle it, right? And so you have to, you are not just a former player saying something at a press conference anymore. It is far different than that. So I think that's a really interesting
one. Especially if you're not directly involved in that whole situation, right?
Yeah.
If you're not Clarky had nothing to do with that clip.
I haven't seen the video. So what did he just ask about the incident, or was it something else? Was he trying to get to?
Irrespective of what was spoken about the incident, actually putting that clip out there is highly insensitive to those two individuals.
This is where I disagree. I don't think it's highly insensitive if you do it correctly and you, it's about journalism.
Correct.
Like
you have to go through the journalistic medium of having a conversation with those people.
But not even just a conversation. If you go out and you uncover something about that story, right? And you have a piece of paper in front of you, I think you have a journalistic, issue.
But then you're thinking purely as a journalist, right? I'm not thinking purely as a journalist. Like
no.
You are a former cricketer who's a captain of your country, who's played cricket with these people, right? You know these people individually.
You can message
all
them.
it will take, all it would take for you is to pick up the phone. If you're purely a journalist, by all means, you've got hold of this video, you want to exploit it and you want to make the most of it for your journalistic, future, then you'll do it if it gives you those 15 minutes of fame. But here, you are a part of the whole ecosystem of former cricketers, right?
Agreed.
It's going to take is to pick up your phone and message said individuals involved in that thing and say, hey, I've gotten hold of this. Can I put this out with your permission? Because I want to respect your sensitivities, because this involves you and something that involves perhaps a bad part or a negative part of your career, right? That much sensitivity any human being must have if you're from the same industry. You owe that.
It's really interesting. So, I've had some pretty big stories over the time that I haven't run with, right?
Yeah.
And, I think maybe one of the more famous ones would be the Dane van Niekerk and Marizanne Kapp. So I knew they were a couple well before anyone else was aware that they were a couple, right? And I wanted to do a big story with them. And not in cricket. I wanted to do a big story on ESPN W, the big women's site, to be like, this is really interesting because, as you know, you've got a captain and then you've got a fast bowler. So the captain is literally making decisions with their fast bowler on the field, but they also happen to be married to each other or in a relationship, I think, at that stage. I thought that was a really interesting one, but I didn't want to do that unless they were involved, right?
Yeah.
Just because I didn't want to out them, right? I didn't
Yeah.
know how many people knew and
You
how
have to be
popular it was in
sensitive.
South Africa and everything else. And the same with, and I think it's now out there publicly, but Glenn Phillips. I was told very early on in Glenn Phillips's career that he had, I think it's ADHD. He has, and you know, I wanted to do something with him, but I didn't feel that he was quite ready. Again, I could have done those pieces without them, but what's the point? It's, for me, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. I think the more interesting thing is if you have this information, and I'm following this story literally, I didn't hear about this, the Clark Modi thing until Sri Sant's wife, who once cooked me a great chicken dinner. So I'm completely on her side of this. But I think the more interesting piece is probably to go to Sri Santobaji with this, right? And talk to them directly on camera and make it that. And that's what I was talking about before, of not understanding journalism, not understanding production, not understanding the good side of it. Because you get hits and information here, but the actual real story is probably still from the other side there. And if they don't want to do it, then you have to make a decision of who you want to be, right?
Yeah.
And he might still have wanted to do it, but at least then they know it's coming.
Exactly.
And I think that's a big difference.
The decency of having a conversation, just as a human being, to say, hey,
Yeah.
this has happened. Can I do it? Can I not do it? What do you think? Because it hadn't come out for 20 years or 17 or 18 years, however long it has been. Doesn't need to come out now. And if it is coming out now, it has to come out through the right channels. People have to be respected. Those people involved have to be had a conversation with, and then let it come out with a disclaimer there. Right? This is because you also want to set the right precedent. You want to set the right example, right? Because everyone's got access to YouTube today, right? Right? Like for me, one of my biggest learnings about talking about, say, for example, in a podcast about Virat Kohli's captaincy was, my biggest learning was, hey, this is I spoke about this incident which I had first-hand information of, right? But I hadn't spoken to Virat about it, right? And with bearing my relationship with Virat, I should have had the decency to actually, hey, Virat, like, this is what I think, you know? And but maybe the conversation never happened organically for us to actually, or we didn't spend enough time for that to actually happen organically. But I acknowledged it to Virat. And I said, listen, Virat, like, notwithstanding any of this, this is what I believe, and I should have actually spoken to you about it before I actually said it out in public. And for that, I apologize. Right?
It's one of those weird things. I've been lucky enough to work with so many cricketers who've gone from cricketers to broadcasters, right?
Yeah.
And they always have these high ideals of what they're going to do. And then they realize how much more complicated it is.
It is.
And, you know, quite often you will, and you have this directly, you are commentating on people that you share change rooms with.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
And you can't be a good broadcaster if every time you want to tell a story, when it comes to your mind, if you run back to that player, they might be out on the field playing at that time.
Sure.
And so you end up in this interesting place of where you want to be. And you and I have talked about this before about, you know, as a cricketer, trying to work out what kind of commentator you want to be, what voice you want to use, how you want to be seen, you know, by the public and everything else. It's really tricky. But I think in commentary, good commentators think about this. I think too often with podcasts and YouTube, players just say, oh, I just have to be on camera for half an hour each week and answer some questions from someone, right? And I remember having these conversations with players who became commentators where they were like, oh, this is so easy. And I said, if it's easy, you're not doing it right, right? Because there is a real art and a skill to this. And I think at the moment, we're sort of in that middle section of where we go, you know, in the future, because as we discussed earlier, more and more players are going to get podcasts and YouTube channels and Instagram lives and whatever the next Twitch streams. Do we have a cricket Twitch streamer? We should. So, you know, all those things are going to happen more and more as we come ahead. But there has to be conversations. And I think a lot of the issues at the moment is that and this comes back to Sonny's comments, essentially, right? Which is essentially people are saying things so that other people will talk about them. Right? Michael Clark has got what he wanted out of that interview.
Yeah.
right? We're sitting here
Yeah.
talking about it.
And
It's
I'll speak
become
for
a kind of
myself,
viral
right?
thing.
From like in that whole conversation, like the whole intent was not to speak about Virat. That interview was supposed to be about me, right? About my life. And then I was asked a question which I honestly spoke to. Now, I didn't take into consideration at that point the sentiments of Virat, or or the fact that, hey, I even this if this is what I believe, he should know that I believe this about that whole situation, and that gives me the right to voice that, externally. And for me, I felt like, as far as my relationship or my camaraderie with Virat was concerned, was impacted by that, and I saw that for what it was, just based on that one-on-one relationship, right? And for me, my learning from that was when I spoke to him about it was that, listen, I acknowledge that I should have spoken to you about this before, even if this is what I believe, and I can, like, for me, every person's entitled to believe their what they want to based on their experience, right? And I didn't speak about me. I didn't speak about my experience with Virat. I spoke about what I saw some of my closest friends experience under his leadership, right? And his style of leadership. It wasn't even his leadership, his style of leadership. And everyone's entitled to have their own style of leadership.
Yeah.
And everyone's entitled to have their opinion of that style of leadership,
Yeah.
right? But I felt, at least for my relationship with him, I should have spoken to him about it before me speaking about it on national television or whatever that was. For me, that was the learning from that whole thing. And I think that sensitivity we must extend to cricketers, at least in the same fraternity, or at least to people in the same fraternity.
Yeah, look, I've always found it fascinating, this whole discussion of, I remember, I remember talking to players who were like, I'd never become commentators, and then they become commentators, and they become the same commentators that they moaned about.
They've hated.
Yeah, and it's a really tricky thing, the way that you do it. And I've sat in bars after working with players, and they've gone through tweets that I've said about them, and I was like, yeah, but what in that tweet do you think I wouldn't say to your face? Right?
Yeah.
Like, I would, you now know me well enough. So you held on to that for like 7 years, that tweet, right?
Yeah.
Whereas we bumped into each other in the hallway all the time. If you'd have brought it up and I would have explained exactly why I wrote that tweet, right? We would have had a laugh of it, or you would have been upset and we would have walked along. Some of this, and I don't want to get into all your other projects here, but some of this is just because men are not very good at talking to other men about things that bother them. But we'll save that for the Robbie's motivational course, which you can find on his LinkedIn page. Let's go to some super chats. Where are we? Siddharth says, Cricket Info folks were talking about how playing multiple formats back to back can have a serious negative impact with the adjustment in technique that is needed in batters. That's about Gill
Thoughts
being
about
multi-format.
this with regards to. I don't think it'll change Gill's technique that much. I think, if anything, could have a positive impact on his technique. We were talking about him open up his shoulders a little bit and facing his left shoulder to the right shoulder of the umpire, so that LBW gets negated. With the red ball, we were talking about that when we spoke about the test series. I think on that front, it can actually have a positive impact on his technique. But with a lot of other cricketers, it certainly is a point of conversation. But again, self-awareness is required to navigate through this stuff. And if they have thought about their game deep enough, then they will make adjustments, and adjustments from a place of being absolutely aware of the adjustments they're making and knowing when to switch back to what. But the switch also takes time. It doesn't. You don't make that switch like on a whim. You need to do the switch X number of times before you can do it on a whim. You need to become a master of sorts before that can happen.
This is probably a conversation for another day, but I think you can make an argument that playing first-class cricket, 50-over cricket, actually helps your T20 cricket anyway, because you're in more situations. You're in different kinds of rhythm. When you get to the top level of the IPL, you are facing the best bowlers in the world, and so you need the best defensive technique to stop Trent Bolt with the new ball, or whatever, whoever that may be, right? So even if there is a negative impact from sometimes switching between the two formats, the fact that you are a 3-format player, I think we've seen that sometimes with guys like Shivam Dubé and Tim David, that sometimes their games are not quite as rounded as they should be, just because they're not those kinds of players. But it is a different conversation.
Because the speed's different, right? because the speed is different, right? From the IPL, international cricket, and you go back to first class cricket. But the thing about first class cricket is that's where you build your disciplines. That's where like, you
Exactly.
build your techniques. So if you're playing a level lower, but it's about challenging yourself from a place of self-awareness that okay, I'm playing this for these reasons, I'm building these aspects of my game up, and if I'm doing it with that intention, then the step up above becomes even better, right?
Yep.
You start performing even better there.
Pav says, UV's innings of 70 off 30 during the '07 World T20 made my family believe in Indian cricket again. Robbie had the best seat during that. Was the Chappell Dravid era really as bad, or was he a scapegoat?
It was really as bad. That's the short answer.
Oh, well, you know, now we're going to do wait, just let me write that note down. Chappell, Robbie. He's got a new book out, Greg Chappell, by the way. I'm not sure what it's about, but I think he wrote it with Ken Peace. And it's come out recently. He's a fascinating cricketer to talk to other cricketers about, because they either talk about him like he's God or like he's the devil, like he's the most binary person in cricket. Like some of the stories I've heard are just phenomenal from players. We're just like, he did what? He said what to you?
He had an assistant that was there with him when he was coach of Indian team. Bro, the quality of human being of that person was just like, I was 20 years old, I was 19, 20 years old, and I could see it as broad as daylight then. You know, the way the way he interacted with certain people or personnel of Indian cricket. Like it's stuff that you see, right? And sorry, Yash, we'll get back to it. We don't know why it was
It
deleted.
just hasn't come up, Yash. If you
Yeah,
you might
probably
just
hasn't
if
come
you
up.
just do a normal comment, we can find it, but it seems to have disappeared.
So yeah.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
so
the Chappells
there's a
are weird people. Like, I don't know Greg very well at all, but I work with Ian at Cricinfo quite a bit, and I've chatted to him a few times. He's a really weirdly intense person, I find. Ian Chappell, and they're not people beset by self-doubt, Robbie, are they?
no,
Like
no.
they're people who are
They're
convinced
very
that,
self-assured.
yeah, that they are correct, but they are also not linear thinkers. I mean, I give them this as a credit for both of them, right? We might disagree with a lot of the stuff they say, but they really do come at these things from different angles than other people would come at them from. But they've got this outsider mentality with this absolute assuredness that they're correct. And so if you're not on side with them, it's very hard. I say this just purely, having worked with Ian a little bit. Sometimes it's hard to have a conversation with him because he's so sure he's right, and there's no give and throw in the conversation because he's just right. And I can imagine, I know Greg's different than him, different kind of person, but I can imagine that sort of thing as a coach would be hard to deal with as a player when you're like, well, wait a minute. I did get here, and I do know something about my game.
Yeah, sure. And I think that's something that you see a bunch of in cricket, and especially in certain countries.
Which is more true? Dhoni is the best keeper in the IPL, or are there a bunch of players standing behind the stumps pretending to keep wickets for the sake of the team? No offense to one of the hosts, to either of the hosts. Well, I mean, no offense to me.
Dude, I had at one point when I was keeping for KKR, I had the most dismissals as a wicketkeeper in the IPL. Ahead of
Yeah,
MS. And
but
so as when I
you
went
had
to
slightly more attacking
RR,
spinners.
but when I went to RR and then CSK after that, then the numbers dwindled so I wasn't pretending to keep the stumps. I loved it and I enjoyed it, and I think I was really good at it. But I
Can I
think
ask you a
Dhoni is the
question?
best keeper in the IPL for sure, hands down.
Do you self-identify as a keeper?
I do.
More okay, because I think that's an important thing. If you talk to a player and they're like, "No, I mean I keep, but I'm not a keeper," whereas
No, I do.
so there's a big difference there. I do.
Yeah.
I reckon.
And the
we could
thing
probably
is, see, the
find.
challenge of being someone who's open to doing anything for a team is that you get used a lot, right? And because you're open to doing stuff for your team, they want you become the easiest movable piece from one place
Yeah.
to the other. Your versatility, which is a boon, becomes a bane after a certain point in time because because of your versatility itself, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I was a very decent fielder. I could keep well as well, and I could open the batting and bat in the middle order, bat in the death. But for each of those roles, you need different. There are different measures by which you can reach success, and you need different levels of backing with each thing. Like as an opening batter, you can give me 4 opportunities, and if I'm not performing well, you cut me off. But as a finisher, you have to give me about 8 to 10 opportunities, and if I've not done well, then you cut me off, right? And then you give me enough notice to say, okay, this tournament at this point, in this tournament you're going to be fielding, you're not going to be keeping. So then I focus and give myself the time to use my versatility as a fielder to to remember and get all those aspects of fielding back into my hands and my eyes and my biomechanics. And the same thing if I'm going into keeping, you tell me well in advance so that I can prepare myself as a wicketkeeper. That needs to happen, right? And because we're the most easiest movable piece, you are thrown around in different positions and you're a bit of nothing at the end.
I think
So
the problem was, Robbie, you were too talented.
yeah, I think so. And too open.
All right. Thank you very much. Like, subscribe, do all the things that you do. If you're following my channel and not Robbie's, follow his channel and vice versa. Instagram, all those sorts of things. And we will see you again next week, I assume, for more Asia Cup shenanigans.
Yeah, Asia Cup. DP World, we're waiting on you.